This is Pod Populi,
podcast for the people.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the FemForce podcast. My name is Rachel Paskvan, and I'm your host. And today I'm joined by a very special friend, Caslon. I met her in Mexico City, actually, on a women's travel trip with Wild Terrains, which is something I love to do and one of the companies I highly recommend. And she was in Mexico City with her mom on vacation, who is just the most precious human ever. And I learned so much about her. She's a social media strategist, which I feel like today's day and age, everybody needs these tips and tricks. And she also works fully remote, but not just in one location, multiple location. She is the full-time, she takes work remote to a whole new level. So thank you for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's so good to see you. And thank you so much for having me. It's definitely been a while since we chatted and we were in Mexico City, but it does kind of feel like we were just yesterday heading to the Frida Kahlo Museum.
Right? We were getting so much culture that trip.
We really were.
So tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got into social media strategy. I feel like social media has obviously been around for a little bit here, but it's really taken a whole new level with corporations having actual social media team members and actual orgs within their companies, in addition to having people who specialize in this, like along with like college degrees are now being formed around social media strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, back when I was in school, there wasn't a social media degree. I actually thought that I was going to go into PR like a lot of people in the gift of gab and in a BA program. You typically are finding your way to a communications role. So out of school, I thought I wanted to do PR. I interned at a few agencies and I had an interest in food and beverage. So I decided I wanted to work at a specialized PR shop that focused in food and bev. And that led me to a very small agency in Toronto called The Hot Plate. And when I went for the interview, I was so excited about the food and bev, and they had a PR program and offering, but they were actually sunsetting it. So they brought me in to finish up some of the PR duties that were happening at that coordinator level. And they were ramping up social because they thought that this was where the business and the industry was going and where they could offer the most value. And so reluctantly, because I was so interested in PR and food and bev, I thought, okay, this will be a transition, but was really exciting to be there as the company grew and the social program grew. I went from doing more of that, like what we consider to be social media, like the community management, responding to the brands on behalf of them in the DMs and doing the content calendars for the organic posts, to then evolving to doing more of that paid social, which is really where I spend most of my time. All those annoying Instagram ads and sponsored posts that you get are usually me. And then more of that kind of client relationship and strategy. So it really has evolved. And I think as social has become taken more seriously by brands, the seat at the table has kind of escalated from being, mostly with those day-to-day contacts to being up more so at that like account director level, working with other, CMOs and things of that level, which has been really exciting to have my career kind of grow with the industry as well.
And how do you stay on top of all the trends? I feel like they put out reels, they had stories, and then I mean TikTok changed the entire game over COVID. And then in addition to, X, now you have threads that came on the level, and you just saw all these memes of like social media managers being like, oh my gosh, like I have to learn a whole other platform now and like utilize that. So how do you go about when it's like always evolving and always changing?
Yeah, I would say there's no one-stop shop, which is a challenge, but I do subscribe to like every newsletter imaginable. And I also have access to things like eMarketer, and I have an interest in beauty now as well as food and bev. So things like the glossy.com, like emails, the business of fashion, those types of like industry newsletters are extremely helpful. But then there's nothing like just staying, unfortunately, on the pulse of what's actually happening in apps. So there are usually like TikTok and Instagram. They do have areas for marketers to go for like trending audio, creative inspiration, keywords, and things like that. But a lot of it is just going into platform and kind of staying close to what's happening and using it as the user would, which is maybe an excuse why my screen time is very, very long. And my husband says I should put those limits, but I say it's for work. And I do think it's important to remind yourself you can't do it all. Like I do really, I need to know everything that's happening on all the platforms, but I really do specialize in like Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, as I find for my clients, that's where they spend the majority of their time and their dollars. So that's where I'm, making sure that I'm taking courses and doing the newsletters that are specified to those platforms. I try to spend the time there because if you try to be a master of all of them, A, you'll never sleep, and B, you'll be a master of none.
And do you feel like you're just inspired, like in creativity? I feel like social media is so creative, and that's something I completely lack. I'm like logical lists, like very A type. And I see these people and these creators out there that are just literally creating these amazing reels and different kind of things that they're doing. Where do you get your creativity and your ideas from? Like, do you just stem from it and kind of brain dump, or you're like, oh, that'd be cool and live in the moment?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say, I've seen your Instagram. You are creative. It's not like you don't have creativity. And I think that that's something as well that I used to say about myself. Like, I used to say, like, oh, I'm not, because my father is an artist. So there's that creativity, but then there's a lot of different types of creativity. And of course, it is visual creative that we see like, within our feeds. But I do think even like strategy can be really creative. And I think that we're all very creative in our own ways, but I will say that once you just allow yourself, even if you're planning to keep it in the drafts and just like play around, that's usually where I have like the most fun is I'll see something, maybe save an audio, and then that's how I kind of started making content for myself because I was doing it for brands all the time, but wanting to make it for myself always felt like I was more nervous because it felt like, oh, this is a reflection of me putting it on your
Yeah, it's
feed.
personal.
It is very personal. So even just doing something where I brain dump a bunch of ideas and then just look for a few audios and then build as though it's never going to leave the drafts, which is dangerous. I know because everyone says just publish your drafts. But that to me is really a great place to just create without the fear of what people might think or if it's not maybe as good as you want it to be. And then the more you do that, the more you start to think, well, I have to publish this one. This one's actually good.
Oh my gosh, no, I think about that and then how you like I just learned what the word evergreen means for those
Yep.
out there, where you can continually use content and like reuse it. And I was like, that's a thing.
It's
No one
gold.
no one talks about these kind of things. And you're doing this married with the cutest little dog also. And you're traveling around. So how do you feel that work remote has played a role, like within your role and like within social media? I feel like a lot of the roles are able to be remote nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I'm at an agency, a digital agency that is 100% remote. They're named Code 3. Check them out. But I basically came from a agency background. I've always been an agency girly. But I always thought I'd be in office. I liked the routine. I didn't really think about, I think a lot of us didn't think about it as an option, that we felt we had to be in the office. And of course, like everyone, I got to go home or was sent home rather during the pandemic to start doing my job there. And on the flip side, my husband was a bartender at the time. And so he was home. We were recently married, no cute Bonita Chihuahua yet, but we both were spending time together in the house and realizing that we were lucky and that, some people divorced and we were really happy to spend the time together and started to think, wow, we have opposite schedules. He's like the night shift at a
Mhm.
bar and I'm the daytime. So it's definitely something that made us think, could we change our lives a little bit when things go back to normal, if and when they do, to have a little bit more flexibility in our schedules and be a little bit more aligned to have that time together? Because when you're younger, and I'm still young, we're both still young, but you do kind of think, okay, this is my time to grind out for my career.
Yeah.
And it did for me anyways lead to burnout and just being fully immersed in that. And I had the excuse of, well, my husband's working anyways. And of course you want to see friends, but you're like, oh, it's no problem. It's not like I have to be home for dinner. I could stay till 7. I could stay till 8. Oh, I'll just order some takeout to the office with the girls that are still working on the same project. So for me, it was kind of an eye-opening experience to be home and see that I could totally do this job without someone beside me and do it all remote and feel actually that I was getting a little bit more done in the day because I am a chatty Cathy. And of course, you end up at the water cooler, in the snack room, and you want to go for a cute
Yeah.
coffee walk. So for me, I was feeling like I was getting more done. And I was also around at the time, only my husband family, but now I'm with my dog. And I just started to think about ways that I could potentially have that be my normal moving forward. And at the time, I was actually supposed to move to New York for my job. And I was very excited because I had always wanted to live in New York City. I mean, like, who doesn't?
It's a
Um,
vibe.
it's a vibe. It was like lifelong dream. But I was doing the job remotely for about a year. And I was going to have to go into the office about 2 days a week, which wasn't bad at all. So it's already kind of a hybrid situation. But I realized that I didn't love the job. It was actually more an account manager role. So being more of that client liaison than being creative and being in the strategy. I was kind of more managing people now than I was doing the work. And so I decided to leave that job, take a risk, and look for a job that would be 100% remote and would allow me to travel. Because I know some companies are remote, but then they do require you to be within a state or you can work outside of the country for like a month maximum. So I was kind of, yes. So I was kind of looking for that unicorn, if you will. And I was really lucky in that I was kind of combing through job descriptions and found one that said, looking for paid social strategist, which is definitely what I'm most interested in. And then 100% remote with the opportunity to travel to New York. So those were all the boxes, and decided to do that. Not fully sure if we would maybe still move to New York or what we would do. But in between that, we ended up going to Mexico for a quick 3 months and just fell in love. So now we kind of spend our
She says
time.
a quick fourth of the year.
Yeah, we were going to go for a bit of a like break in between starting new jobs. We both wanted to have a bit of a decompress, just relax. And yeah, we got to Sayulita, Mexico, which is just outside of Puerto Vallarta, and fell in love with it. And so my husband then decided he has to figure out a way to get a remote job because the bartender job, you can work obviously as a bartender anywhere.
Yeah.
You can't work legally just in any
Right.
country. So he's Canadian. And so he then looked for Canadian online work. And he actually does now social media management, which is very funny because he was looking at a lot of different careers. And I was already there to mentor him, and he was able to kind of get in at an entry level position. And that's really allowed us to now decide, okay, we can go wherever we want, which gives us the flexibility we're in Canada right now for the summer to be with family when it's the best time of year and sunny. And then we'll usually go down to the States for the holidays and then go to Mexico for the bulk of winter because we're kind of snowbirds at this point.
Hey, it's cold. You don't want to be doing any of that. Totally get
Yeah.
that. And I mean, your husband going into social media is so interesting. Was he kind of like, I've been watching you and that's interesting, or was it more because this is going to be a full-time remote and fit our lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say it was the latter. Forever, he kind of when he was looking for work, he went back to school, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to retrain, and he went back to start learning coding and to be able to kind of pivot to a new career. And unfortunately, the timing was like right when AI really exploded, and suddenly code could be written by a robot, and not as many
Right.
hands-on keyboards are needed. And then also that big group of tech layoffs. So he was kind of like, okay, I just invested all this money in a career change. and it's not really working out. And he kept mentioning like, would you train me in social? And I kept saying like, you don't want to do this because he's not someone who's very active personally on social
Yeah,
media. That has now changed. He's like making reels and doing things for himself. It's adorable.
love
Um,
that.
I know it's like, oh, we can talk shop now. So reluctantly, I was like, okay, I'll train you. But it's been great because it does allow us the flexibility. And I do like now that we can talk shop and spitball ideas because when you are working remotely, one of the things that is lost is those informal brainstorm moments. You usually have to book a Zoom and a time with someone to kind of go back and forth with your ideas. Whereas he can kind of flag me down or I can with him and we can just chat through something, which is nice.
No, that's so amazing. And then what makes you stay productive? I mean, do you have tips or tricks, or are there certain tools you do throughout the day to get through it? I feel like when I'm home working remote, I'll be like, all right, I'm in it. And then I'm like, God, I should do the dishes right now. Like, I can see them. I should just do it right now. And so my day kind of gets a little bit askew, and I have to like really buckle down and have like a set routine, or else mine doesn't work. Do you have any tips or tricks, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, I'm pretty fortunate in that I can be focused. Obviously, the thing that for me is difficult is when you are in the social platforms, you go to check something, and I'm very guilty of that. And then you're like, oh no, I just was scrolling for 10 minutes because I saw what I need to
You're
see
like,
and then
yep.
I just kept going. Muscle memory. But I would say a couple of things that I do that I find really helpful is I am a huge fan. It's super old fashioned, but it works of like calendar blocks. So I'll put like hidden focus time calendar blocks in my calendar for all the things I need to do in the day. And that keeps me like if I don't have a lot of meetings, that keeps me on task because I can then be like, okay, yes, I could do the dishes right now, but I actually have 30 minutes left in this block to complete XYZ. Do I maybe try to complete it? And if there's time to throw some things in the dishwasher at the end of that block and I start the next one, like as an in-between break, if you will, and like get myself
Mhm.
a little iced coffee or something in the between. I think that helps me a lot. And I also, if I don't need my phone, sometimes I'll put it in like another room, and
Yeah.
I'll put it on like do not disturb. And I'll just do that along with like a Slack notification. Say I need to get really focused in one of those meeting block or those personal blocks. I'll put like Slack notifications, do not disturb. I'll put a little status that I'm like heads down working, like at me if it's important. But other than that, like please don't message me. And then I'll also put my phone on do not disturb and put it in the other room. And I feel like that's a way for me to get like really focused in and usually then put in some headphones and like put on either a podcast or some music and just like narrow, kind of just zoom in and focus for that time because otherwise it can get like so distracting just to like every little thing can be distracting, especially I
Yeah.
have an adorable dog that's always here and like pawing at me. So sometimes I'll even put Bonita in the other room and be like, this is focus time.
This is focus time. You need to be in your office too, Bonita. I love that.
Exactly.
And do you have any kind of like specific boundaries? I feel like social media, like you were saying, you're on the phone and you're scrolling to look specifically for something at work, and then you're 10 minutes deep on, in somebody's album in from 2012. So when you're on there, is there a way to set boundaries so your social media is still personal for you when you want to go on and like check something out, but also like it doesn't flood over to like an 18-hour workday because you're also looking at stuff for work?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, like, for me, I do try to, I mean, I've done this in the past. I don't have it at the moment, but I have had a like Finstagrams and like fake TikToks and stuff where I've curated the algorithm to be specific for my client and making sure that, like, say that it is food and bev or whatever, all of the content is going to be really related to that. And that way I'm not like, especially for TikTok, because the algorithm works
Yeah.
so quickly. So you look at one thing for a client, and then your next 10 ads are going to be related to that. So I have done that in the past to make sure that like my personal scrolling experience at the end of the day, it still feels like true to me and
Mhm.
enjoyable. And I do try to like set limits in terms of like I don't have screen time limits on the app, but I do try to have like, okay, 30 minutes before bed. It's not much. I used to try to do an hour, but I can't do that. 30 minutes, like no more scrolling, and just like try to calm down and rest and be ready for the day tomorrow, because it can really creep into like your entire life. And then I would say when it comes to like the work-life balance thing, I'm sure like for you and for anyone that like works remotely at all, it can be really hard because you do have the ability to work anywhere and anytime. And as you said, like that can lead to working 24/7. And I think that's the trap I fell into in my previous role, which is why I needed that quick 3 months in Mexico to like really just unplug and really reset. I'd say now, because I've seen what can happen and experienced it, like experienced the burnout, you do have to be protective of your time. And that's partly what I do with like the calendar blocks, but I'll also put in like a hard stop, like not every day and not when there's
Yeah.
a big project due or
Try to set
something.
those boundaries.
We try to set those boundaries and have a hard stop. If you have like plans with friends, like those are valuable. If you have plans with family, or you have a Zoom call planned with like people you love and you live out of the country, like that is just as important as a meeting with, your client. I think obviously that, there's days where this one's up
Yeah.
here and this one's up here, but I do think that that's something that has helped me, is just like having the boundary within my like self of like prioritizing that being equally important. I'm able to then be like, okay, no, I have to get offline to do that. And sometimes, say I have a dinner or something, I'm happy to jump back on later and take a quick look and make sure that everything's fine. But I think that that takes a little bit of like going through the other side where you don't have any boundaries, you run yourself
Yeah.
ragged,
The
and it
burnout's real.
requires a bit of, yeah, it requires the like reframing. Like I feel like to be able to do it now is because I've done also a lot of like personal work to like value the other things in my life, or value the other parts of myself that have nothing to do with work. So that way I like show up for myself and I'm like, oh no, that's like super important. Like I have coworkers that'll block like personal training in their calendar. And I don't do that, but I surf in Mexico. So I'll like every once in a while put like a surf block, and everyone's very supportive and wants me to enjoy, my workout the way that they get to enjoy theirs. And I think that obviously has to come from the company culture, but I think it's just, you'd be surprised how much when you do put it, put that foot forward and say, like, I need this time for myself. If you're in the right environment, and maybe if you're not getting that support, maybe it's like a little
Yeah.
inclination that maybe there's another place for you that would be better fit. Usually it's met with support, because we all just want to like enjoy our lives and also have a great like work and home life.
And then when you're doing that, do you feel like Mexico is going to be that's your winter destination? Is there other places you would want to work from? And just like the time, like I know the time zone thing for me, I can only do Europe, and that's about as far as I can go. Otherwise, I'm, working 3, 4 in the morning, which is not bueno for anybody.
Yeah, I definitely have thought about you actually, because I see you working the European time zones. And I've also thought about, I've seen some TikToks where everyone's pitching you to go to Europe because of the time difference is actually pretty good. So I would be interested to try that. The reason I do like being on the Pacific coast and working EST hours is right now, during Mexico actually doesn't do daylight savings anymore. So right now in Mexico, I work 7 to 3, which I actually love. Like another thing about remote work that I love the flexibility is that I know I have to work EST, but I technically could be working different hours based on where I am in the world. So I like that 7 to 3, because in the morning I'm pretty productive. I like to just wake up, have my morning routine, get it done. And then we never really finish at 5. I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
3 is not usually the cutoff. It's usually more like 4:30. But at 4:30, I still feel like I have enough time to like go for a walk with the dog, like get dinner, and still have kind of an evening, which feels nice and might not work for everyone. So I love that. Um, I've worked on the opposite, but only in like the East Coast. So I started at 10 and I worked till 6, and I didn't like that, but maybe more of an extreme version that you've done would work for me, because then you get a morning, like you get a full morning
Yeah. I wake up, I go
before.
to a museum, I have a French lunch, like I wander around, I go to the market, do my thing, and then I'll sit at a cafe that allows computers, which is very rare, for like 2 hours, bust out emails, any kind of things, and then I'll take calls like from 6 to midnight, and then I'm like, okay, cool, now it's bedtime, do it
Yeah.
again. But like you
Yeah.
beat a lot of like I don't won't do like go out dinners during the weekdays, but that's doesn't really bother me. Like a lot of my girlfriends there are content creators, so like they're on their own schedule. So if I'm like, let's
Right.
meet for lunch, that actually works out so much better because they probably have things with their, boyfriends or whatever, their husbands. And so like, great, you can do that at night. And during the day though, like I'm going to this museum today. I'm going to wander around and check this out. And it's just a different extreme for sure. Because everybody's always like, it's so dark there. And I'm like, that's nighttime.
Yeah.
It's
It's
nighttime
night.
here.
I would
7 p.m.
love,
here.
I mean, I think, yeah, I would love to do that. I think I would love to go to Portugal, and I would like love to do a bit of the Mediterranean. Like
I could
I would love
totally
to
see you in
see.
Portugal, surfing in
Yeah.
Portugal,
Yeah.
living
So
that lifestyle.
I would love to go. And I've been to Spain, but I'd love to go back and just try the remote work life there. So there's no like set in stone. I think we've gotten in a bit of a rhythm, which is nice. And my company's kind of used to it. Like, oh, she's in Canada for the summer. Oh, she'll be in Florida with family in the fall and like holiday season. And then she'll be back in Mexico. So it's nice that I haven't had to be like, and now I'm here, and now I'm there, and now I'm here. But now that we're both remote, because this is the first year my husband's fully remote as well, we definitely have talked about like, okay, well, this is great, but where else do we want to go? So it's just nice to have that flexibility, and having a small dog who likes to travel is also extremely helpful.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about the planes or like having to like do the whole drive because you can just put her in your lap and go. That's so convenient.
Yeah.
See, Bonita, your size is working in your favor here. I love that. Do you have any social media like tools, like apps that you use that help you with content creation and how to do that? I feel like there's always a new one, just like social media always coming out. But do you have like any favorites that have really helped you, not just in your job, but in your personal social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for work, I'm basically in the platform UIs. So I'm basically in like the ads manager for Pinterest, Meta, TikTok, YouTube, etc. But when it comes to like my own personal creation and things of that nature, I it's I've resisted for a very long time, but I do use CapCut quite a bit now. And it has really brought down the effort and the time needed to create something quick, which is really what I'm in the process of right now, is trying to make things as easy as possible. Because I feel like with content creation, you could spend 20 hours on something, but
Yeah.
it's like 3 minutes, and it's gonna it's usually like 30 seconds, and it's gonna have maybe a lifetime view of like 5 minutes or something when you go back to your analytics. And you just think, okay, I spent this much time creating
Time on
something that
it. Yeah.
it just doesn't, the math isn't mathing. And I also am trying to find ways to keep up with, the schedule that's required to be successful on social. I tell brands and clients this all the time, like the correct cadence, and like that we have to show up consistently. And then in my own personal life, I have trouble doing that because of, if you're doing it all day for someone else,
Yeah.
it's like the last thing you want to do. So right now, the tools that I'm really interested are things that help me keep it quick. So CapCut is one of them. I actually been using Chat GPT a lot just to like finesse captions, help with some of the even just like ideating. Like I have an idea, I think I know where it's going, and I just get it to flesh out some of those bits that would maybe take me a little bit longer.
The
And then
robot's
I
the
actually,
best.
oh, it's so good. Like
Love the robot.
I seriously wouldn't be anywhere without it at this point. I'm concerned if it went away tomorrow, I'd be in
Right. We're all
trouble.
like, I'm like, my assistant's gone. Where did my assistant go?
Exactly. No,
I love this
literally.
all.
And I even use Chat GPT for things like keyword research and kind of like hashtag research as well. So I find it really helpful just for researching as well within social. And sometimes the delay is there, so I wouldn't ask about trends, but If it is something like you want a bunch of search terms, super helpful. And then I use a mix of different social scheduling tools. But I really like Planoly, and I use it mostly for planning out what I'm going to do. I find like it's very visual, and you can add little notes that to help kind of map out what the calendar would look like. But then I do find that later has just been what I typically actually schedule on and get things out the door, from just I don't know why. It's just been where I've kind of planned with one and use the other, because I find that helpful. And then I still use Final Cut Pro for things like, I'm a little old school like that. Like I'll use Final Cut Pro for editing vlogs, something that's a little longer form content. Um, but I am really interested. I've seen some new apps that will take that long form content and then like completely cut it up into clips for you. So that's something that I want to try next is, you upload your full vlog, and, I have like a longer 10-minute YouTube video, for example, and it's going to break it all up and also overlay all the text captions. So stay tuned because that's what I want to try next.
I think that's so cool though, that in your like just not just your personal, but your line of work, you get to learn something new all the time because it's so tech forward based.
Yeah.
Obviously, social media, tech companies, but they get to come out with these new things and you get to like learn a whole new skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the way that they're going as well, like for TikTok, for example, like they've just launched search campaigns. So where that normally would be handled in our company by our search team that does like Google Ads, we now on the social team are learning how to basically do search-based campaigns. So they're constantly, as you know, like one's always trying to become the other, where it's like we're talking about X
Yeah.
now, like we have threads on Instagram because they
Mhm.
want to be part of that like X moment. And then obviously Reels came after TikTok was, dominating the vertical feed. So they're always trying to become each other. We know that to maximize their market share, but it is really fortunate for me that as they kind of bleed into each other, it does allow me to be a better marketer, like beyond just social.
Do you wish you would have been able to take like a social media course in college, or do you feel like what you took has, I mean, obviously you've been successful and you've been able to utilize the things you've learned, but do you think like, I think it's going to keep growing, obviously, and it's all ever changing. Do you think it would really matter to take that kind of path in college comparatively?
I think that's a good question. I think that what would be valuable probably would be to have like a social course within more of a digital marketers program, because I do think, as I was just saying, as they all kind of blend into each other, and there is such a requirement for, you know, us to be able to have everything feeding into one another. The marketing channels used to live a lot more siloed. We're definitely seeing, and obviously this is, I feel like my mom's been saying this even since like the early aughts when she was a marketer. So it's nothing new, but because of all the tracking and then moving away from cookies, and everything does really need to be as integrated as possible. So I
Yeah.
think for me, it's been very helpful to be a specialist in social media. But for someone coming into the industry, I think it would be really helpful for them to have a broader understanding of all digital marketing channels and how they all work together. And then be able to think, I mean, maybe they do want to specialize in social and then pursue that. So I'm not I'm not familiar with what's available, but to me that would be more valuable and allow them to have that broader understanding. Because for me, I've had to constantly pull myself out of my like specialization and be like, okay, I need to do some learning on, programmatic, because this is affecting my channel in this way. So I think if you were to get that baseline of how it all works from the ground up, then you could specialize where you have the most passion. And I think that would be really beneficial.
No, that's amazing. And where do you see yourself? Do you want to stay in the beauty kind of and food and bev kind of area? Or are you thinking different areas?
Yeah. So right now, I actually am just transitioning off of a major beauty client that has been my whole life for the last 2.5 years. And I'm transitioning over to two arts-based clients. So one's an online art retailer, and another is it's more like consumer goods, but they work with artists and have like their prints on the various items. So I'm kind of moving. It was unexpected, but because I had luxury beauty experience, the luxury art was like an easier transition because I wanted to learn something new, and I'm going to be learning a few new channels, which is exciting. So other than like the social channels, I'll get some exposure to search and to programmatic and to a few other areas. Um, so for me, I think I want to just master as much as possible within the new accounts that I'm going on to. But because I have a personal interest in like travel, food and bev, and beauty, I think I foresee myself continuing to pursue that more so in like my personal channels and like staying close to it. Because I'd love and like, many years from now, I would love if I ever wanted to do something on my own and like freelance. I think I'd still specialize in those industries.
No, that's amazing. And I feel like it's just like we've been talking about, it's ever growing. So you're going to have, in 2 weeks, there could be a completely new option out there. And I think that's so cool
Yeah.
that you're going to have all these different things you're going to be able to do. So to wrap up the podcast, I like to ask one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to your 16-year-old self, what would that be?
Oh my God, that's a good
I know.
question. Do you ask this to everyone? Because
I
I'd
ask
be
this to
interested.
everyone. Yep.
I can't wait to hear everyone else's answers. Um, what would I say? I think I would say slow down. It's going to work out. You don't have to do everything at once. And it's going to be great. You just have to trust what you want because I think so much of my earlier years and career was going as quickly as
Yeah.
possible to check off all the boxes that I thought I wanted, but really were kind of probably what society or parents or everyone else wanted
Yep.
for me. And if I had maybe slowed down just a little bit, I would have maybe seen other areas that I wanted to explore. Ultimately, I'm so happy where I am now and I wouldn't change anything, but I think I was just rapid fire. And I think so many people at 16 are too. You just want to say, I know what I'm doing. I know the career path. I know the school. And this is
There
where I'm
can't
going to
be
be
any
intense.
changes. Like it has to be
Yeah,
like that.
so rigid. And I definitely never thought I would be doing what I'm doing now. And I'm happier than ever. So if I hadn't let myself eventually slow down
Yeah.
and see what else was out there, then I wouldn't be as happy as I am today. So I would just tell her to slow down, breathe. It's going to work out.
It's gonna get there. I love that. Well, tell everybody where they can find you on social media because everybody should give you a follow.
Yes, thank you so much. So it's Caslon, ITS.CASLON. And that is the same across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest as well, but not as active there. And yeah, definitely get in touch. I'd love to chat with you. And if you have any questions about work remote and how I got started or resources, I'm always there to help people. I'm currently that resource for a lot of people in my life. And if you also want any information about Mexico, also that girl too.
She is that girl for so many things. Thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate it. Talk to everyone soon.
Thanks so
Bye.
much, Rachel. Bye.